For more on how and why the business community is working towards a low-carbon economy, I spoke with Nigel Topping, CEO of We Mean Business. His company is behind the Global Climate Summits, and I asked about the highlights of the Paris conference.
I think some of the highlights from the summit is a real sense that action is accelerating. Technological innovation is really happening in terms of the cost of photovoltaic cells to generate power from the sun coming down. Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla Motors, announcing a couple of weeks ago much cheaper than expected electrical storage. More and more companies committing to their own very rapid reduction in emissions. I mean, many household American names, Kellogg's, Colgate, Mars, and excitingly, some Indian and Chinese companies now starting to step up and make big commitments to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels by procuring 100% of their energy from renewable sources. So companies like Infosys in India or Elion and China Light and Power in China.
Yeah.
So the growing number of companies making those kind of commitments and acting on them is what we're seeing here in Paris.
More recently, the United States and China made a fairly big announcement with respect to climate change. They announced a series of targets into the future that were quite substantial. And a lot of the discussion surrounded that was that a lot of these other countries would sort of take and follow the leadership of the U.S. and China. Are you sensing that in Paris?
Yeah, I think Europe has been at the forefront of policy commitment, political commitment and industrial movement on climate change for a while. Committing to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. There have been concerns internationally that very big economies and very big emitters, the biggest two, in fact, China and America, may not be ambitious enough, but there have been very strong signals from both those economies, as you say, of really significant commitments to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, to reduce the polluting CO2 emissions. Yeah. And that combination of China, Europe, and the USA starts to create a sense that the majority of the world's economies and emitters are moving in that direction. So we start to see moves from India, for example, as well, committing to 100 gigawatts of solar power, which is a lot of solar power in the next few years.
One of the key ingredients of this solution is this carbon tax. And right. I have a fairly good grasp of what it is, but I'm certainly not an expert at it. Explain to me how that's going to work, the reaction from the business community, and how that gets implemented.
Okay, well, actually, putting a price on carbon has been one of the main talking points at this conference. In fact, and I'd say a resounding clarion call from business to the governments on the world to put a price on carbon. Carbon is a polluting. It's what's causing this damaging global warming, and it's basic economics. That if you've got something you don't want, then you put a price on it, and then you reduce the use. Businesses like that because it's a market mechanism. You put a price on it, whether it's a tax, as in British Columbia, or a scheme where you put a cap on the amount you can emit, and then tradable allowances, like in California, where they've created a market for it. So
Nigel, it's a real tax, is what I'm saying, right? You pollute, you pay. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, just as you pay for other things that are damaging to the country or the economy, you pay when you pollute. One of the important things, of course, is what do governments do with that revenue? So, for example, in British Columbia, which has a carbon tax of $30 a ton, the provincial government uses that revenue to reduce income tax and to reduce corporation tax. So individuals and businesses love it because it's reducing their tax burden. And actually, British Columbia's GDP has grown more than average for Canadian provinces since they've implemented that. In California, they use the income partly to support less well-off communities who may struggle with fuel costs, and also partly to support green infrastructure like new rail infrastructure. So different governments will use it differently, but it is a new source of revenue which can help shift the burden of taxation away from things which are good, like employment and jobs and profit, to things which are bad, like polluting carbon dioxide.
So look, I mean, it sounds like a pretty good thing, but I have to be honest. I mean, there is some controversy around it. I mean, is everyone on board, or maybe the right question is who's not on board and why?
Well, any major change in the sort of structure of our economy is going to be challenging, right? But one of the great things about using market mechanisms is that businesses are used to competition. And competition, by definition, means winners and losers. So let's not pretend that we can make a transition like this without winners and losers. I think the exciting thing is the message from businesses overwhelmingly today is that at the macroeconomic level, this is good for business. The costs of inaction, the cost of mopping up after the weather disasters or the increased incidence of polluted air in China, which leads to more deaths from asthma, is way higher over time than the costs of cleaning up by investing in green infrastructure. So the majority of businesses understand the science, see the opportunity at the macro level, and for many of them. But of course, there are some businesses who are challenged because it's going to have to mean that they reinvent themselves.